Hi, this is Comrade Kerman here. We are going to be looking at the MRK V Trainer today. This is a scratch-built trainer that I built for a friend of mine. Because it's scratch-built and not a store-bought airplane, there's going to be a lot of really weird quirks that it has that make a lot of sense to me because I built it, but they're not really going to make an awful lot of sense to my friend who I built it for. So this is a video to kind of give them a rundown on how to load the batteries, how to install the wing, and general care of the aircraft, so that he knows what he's doing with it when I gift it to him. So first off, we're going to go into how to uninstall the power pod and install the battery. And we'll also go into a few safety tips here because this has a very old speed control in it and it does some funny, quirky things that I want to make sure he's aware of. Wing is held on with rubber bands. There are 8 of them. And in order to install the battery, the rubber bands that hold the wing on have to be removed. The wing itself doesn't have to be removed to install the flight battery, but the rubber bands at least have to be taken off. There is a blue rubber band holding the power pod in position. The easiest way to remove the power pod is to take the rubber band and just move it back a little bit. This will free up the power pod. Pull the power pod up to unlock it from its little grooves. And then there are some popsicle skewers in these holes on the motor mount here. You want to slide it forward to get it off of those popsicle sticks. Now, after you have the power pod free from the body, you don't want to pull it apart because there is a wire connecting the speed controller to the receiver. Easiest way to do it is just to hold them side by side like this. Battery that I designed this for to be used is a 2200 3-cell. It's the most common flight battery in the hobby as of right now. Anything larger than this is probably not going to fit. However, if you want to put a smaller battery in here, you definitely can. 25-minute flight time with these 2200 packs. I wouldn't suggest going longer than 25 minutes, but depending on your throttle management, 25 minutes is what you're looking at. Maybe set your timer for 20 minutes, give yourself a little bit of extra time, but that's a really long flight time for electric airplane. To install it, you want it as far forward as possible without actually touching this outrunner motor. You don't want the battery up against the motor. It's going to cause the motor to overheat and damage the flight battery. There's Velcro on the bottom, so just kind of push it down as hard as you can and just make sure it's not obstructing that motor. After you have the battery in, it's very, very, very important that you power up your transmitter, your radio. One of the quirks of this speed controller is if it is powered on and there's no signal from the radio, the motor will spin up. It's just a quirk. I'm not exactly certain what causes it. I had an accident the other day where I turned the receiver off when the flight pack was still connected and the motor chewed up my arm here. So always make sure that your transmitter is powered on before you plug in the battery, or else this motor will spin up every time. So just regular EC3 connector, nothing special about it. Plug her in. The speed controller should chime. And for whatever reason, it doesn't beep 3 times to indicate all 3 cells. Again, it's a really old controller, and it just does quirky things, but it works. Then to reinstall, you want to slide the dowels into the holes first, like so. And then, while making sure that you're not binding any of the wires. There is a wire in here. You just want to make sure that that wire, there's a foam doubler in here. You want to make sure the wire is not inside that track that the power pod is supposed to sit in. So just make sure that it's sitting inside the power pod itself. And then slide the dowels into the holes and then push up. You should feel, you can't see them because they're covered by this Velcro, but there are some holes with tabs. The tabs go into the holes on this back end. You should feel the tabs go into those holes back here. They're not going to go into the holes up here because the battery is just a little bit too thick, but you should feel these tabs go into these holes, and that is going to prevent the power pod from being pulled out forward by the thrust of the motor. After you do that, you want to make sure that you move the battery back over, the rubber band back over the power pod. That should keep those tabs in those holes. Very important that that is like that. There's not a huge amount of thrust coming out of this motor, but you want to make sure that that is properly attached. After you have installed your battery and your power pod, would recommend setting up a throttle kill switch. I've got a throttle kill switch on here. Because the throttle kill switch is engaged, my motor isn't doing anything. If you don't have that, the motor will spin up if you bump your throttle by mistake. So safety first, always make sure you have a throttle kill switch while you're manipulating the aircraft. After you have the battery installed, you want to install the wing. There are two servo cables that come up out of this hole here. It doesn't really matter which one is which one. They both do the same thing on each servo, so you can just put them in which one you want. This servo has been soldered, so just be a little careful with how you handle it. Just a moment here while I get this in. Make sure the dark cable lines up with the dark cable. Dark brown on this side on the far left, black on this side on the far left. Then, just to make absolutely certain before you attach the wing, take your your transmitter. Just test the ailerons, make sure they're working. Make sure that, that way if there's a problem, you're not having to fix it after you've attached the wing. Then these connectors, the best way to attach the wing is to gently ease the cables into this hole here, so that at least the connectors are in there. There should be enough of a gap because of the, there are some doublers I put on here. There should be enough of a gap running between these doublers that these wires should be able to sit on there nicely. But I do still like to put the connectors inside the aircraft. Then for attaching the wing, in order to make sure that the wing is true, you want to line these doublers flush with the side of the fuselage. They should be about the same width as the fuselage, maybe a little bit wider. And then there's Velcro that holds the wing secure so you don't have any twisting moment. For CG, your CG can vary depending on what sort of flight performance you're after. I find that it does act a little more docile if you have it slid all the way forward so that the leading edge of the wing is aligned with this doubler here. I find that it has a little more of a responsive tendency if you slide it a little bit further back. Really anywhere between where this where the Velcro starts and the doubler starts, anywhere between those two ranges is your CG range with a 2200 slid all the way forward. For training purposes, I would probably suggest starting with it maybe a little more than halfway back. It does give it a rather docile flight performance when it's there. It does make it a little on the nose heavy side. And then just kind of attach it so that the Velcro engages. And the way I'm doing this is with my left hand, I'm feeling where this doubler is compared to the fuselage to make sure that the wing is true. If it pokes out more on one side, you want to reapply it to the Velcro so that it is true. You don't want the wing crooked. Then after that has been attached, you want to take 8 of these big rubber bands and you alternate between crossing and lengthwise. You start on the back. You notice there are dowels. So you start at the back. And you come forward and cross. Make sure that the rubber band is sitting on this popsicle stick. It's there to protect the foam of the wing, otherwise the rubber band is going to start eating into the foam. So cross, and then you alternate by coming across lengthwise. Again, this would not be a particularly safe thing to do if you don't have that throttle kill. You really want to make sure you have a throttle kill on your radio. Wouldn't take much to accidentally bump the transmitter and have this motor spin up and cut my arm up. Cross.
Where'd you get the rubber bands?
I'm going to give my friend some of these rubber bands. I'm going to give him an extra 8 of them. But they call these file folder rubber bands. They just came from Walmart. It was $3 for a pack. I think there's 50 of them in the pack. They're not really the most neutral colored rubber bands. I don't know. I think they're kind of pretty looking, but they're a good length and they're a good strength for this application. You really don't need more than 8. Actually, I would recommend against more than 8. The point of having these rubber bands is if there is a crash, you want this wing to pop off. You don't want the wing to stay attached to the aircraft. So if you put too many rubber bands on here, the wing is going to have a tendency to stay attached to the aircraft in the event of a crash. And when you crash, you're likely going to catch a wingtip. That's usually the way these planes go in, is you catch a wingtip. And if the wing stays fixed to the aircraft, you're more likely to damage it than if it pops off because of the rubber bands. Also, it's just between the Velcro and the rubber bands, it's just not necessary to have more than 8s. Then to check CG, the CG range is anywhere from the nut of the servo here all the way to about finger length in front of the servo. So your CG range is about from here to here. Again, I find I get the best trainer performance by having the CG about finger's length in front of the servo. So if you put your thumbs in front of either servo, the plane should balance rather nicely. Maybe you can slide them a little bit further back, but you see my thumbs are kind of in between that nut and about finger length in front of the servo. This wing, compared to the rest of the fuselage of the plane, is very, 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 very wide. So you do have a decently large amount of CG play in this. But about right here, if you look at that distance, this is the best training performance, I think. I think it's a little on the tail heavy side if you slide it all the way forward to this doubler here. But it does still fly. So about right here is where you want it. So at this point, the plane is ready to fly. Again, because it is a scratch-built plane, cannot stress how important it is to do a control test every time before you fly. The servos that hold the servos that come back to the rudder and the elevator, they're only held together by hot glue. And I put a lot of hot glue on them, but I did have one pop loose once. So you really want to make sure that these are operating before you fly the plane. So we're going to do a flight video now. We'll end this video and then we'll do a separate flight video to kind of go over the basics on flying it. One last thing though, if you do have a servo pop loose, I did design this bottom plate to be removable. This is not hot glued in. There's tape holding it on. You can either take a razor blade and cut the tape, or the tape should just peel off the foam just fine. And then you can take this off to access the servos that control this. These servos are just held in by hot glue and can pop right out with an X-Acto knife. So you are able to service your servos. However, you may have to cut the foam to run servo wire if these wing servos do end up going bad. But they are replaceable with a little bit of work and a little bit of patience. So all in all, pretty simple construction. If you want measurements for the aircraft, let me know. Post a request for measurements in the comments below. I don't really have plans for it because it is a scratch build, but I would be happy to share my measurements with you if you guys I'd be happy to share the measurements for the plane with you guys if you would like me to. Well, this is Comrade Kerman and with the Mark V Trainer. Keep the pointy end facing up.